All right, let's talk about Theorem 3, the absolute value theorem. Now, this is going to be very closely related to the sandwich theorem, and actually we're going to come back and use the absolute value theorem again in Chapter 10 when we're trying to figure out whether a series converges or not. But for right now, we'll just focus on sequences. So the theorem reads, consider the sequence AN. If the limit as n goes to infinity of the absolute value of an is equal to 0, then the limit as n goes to infinity of an is also equal to 0. Well, if we're going to use the sandwich theorem to talk about this, then we're going to have to figure out sequences that are going to be bigger and smaller. So let's start by just focusing on this part, and let's say we want to find the limit as n goes to infinity of an. So we're going to need to find a sequence that has values smaller than an beyond some value of n. And we're going to have to find another sequence that's going to be greater than an, again, beyond that same value of n. And both of those outside sequences are going to have to converge to the same limit. And as we talked about when we did the last example, the tricky part is always figuring out what those two outside sequences are going to be. Well, here's where things get a little hand-wavy. So I've got my sequence an. Well, if I take the absolute value of an, which is kind of what I want to do, an has to be less than or equal to the absolute value of an. If the term in my sequence is -1, well, the absolute value of that is 1. So -1 is less than or equal to 1. Well, this is also going to be greater than or equal to the negative of that absolute value. So if my next term is a 2 is equal to, I don't know, 3. Well, 3 is going to be greater than or equal to -3, and it's going to be less than or equal to 3. So I've now found a sequence that's smaller and a sequence that's bigger. And as long as those two outside sequences go to the same limit, then I can find the limit of an as n goes to infinity. Well, this one is part of the information that I'm given. I know that the limit as n goes to infinity of the absolute value of an is equal to 0. And it's not too much a stretch of the imagination to see that the limit as n goes to infinity of negative absolute value of an is also going to be 0. So now I've found the limits of these two outside sequences as n goes to infinity. And the sandwich theorem tells me that the limit as n goes to infinity of an will also have to be 0. And that is what this theorem is trying to tell us.